So we're going to get started, and I know that there's a lot of people on our webinar today, and so I just appreciate everyone taking the time and our partners taking the time to join us for today's discussion, which it really is going to be a great dialogue during what I think is a very challenging time for many of you. So thank you for joining us today. This is our first ever hosted webinar for small business, navigating the impacts of COVID-19. And I am Barbara Coffey, Director of Economic Initiatives for the City of Tucson. It is a challenging time. I know you all have a lot of questions. What I would like to do is take the first half of the hour and have our great lineup of speakers share for just 2 or 3 minutes, talk about, first introduce who they are, and then share the resources and assistance that they have available for you. And I'll moderate some questions as we go through as well. And then we'll ask all participants to stay muted since we have such a large number of attendees. And please enter your questions into the chat function, and I can help get those answered. If we cannot get to all the questions, we'll certainly follow up with answers within 24 hours and share those with all who are on the webinar. And so with that, I'm going to start with Gary Melinda, President of the Business Development Finance Corporation here in Tucson. And Gary, if you'll get us started, introduce yourself and share a little bit about the resources that you have available. And you'll unmute yourself for us to do that. Gary, there you are.
All right, can you hear me now? Okay, Gary Melinda, Business Development Finance Corporation. We are an Arizona-based nonprofit corporation, primarily SBA lender. We do have other lending programs. So first of all, for any of our existing customers, we are offering deferments of payments for, depending on the program, 3 to 6 months. So if you are a current borrower, please contact us, and we'll be happy to work with you on that. We've also been working to put together some resources in a program to assist other customers, other needs in the community. At this point, we are hoping to be able to offer a loan of up to $25,000. That would be an interest-only loan for the first 6 months, and then would allow for payments a term of up to 10 years. Just give you a sense of that, if a business owner was to borrow $25,000, the interest-only payments for this first 6 months would be $150, and then the payments after that time would be in the $260, $270. And you may say, well, that's a long time, but there are no prepayment penalties. So if things improve rapidly and you would like to pay that loan off or pay it down faster, all of those are options that the business would have. So that is 1 minute and 59 seconds, Barbara.
Fantastic. Thanks, Gary. And part of some of the things that we'll talk about will overlap, but I think create great complements for the financial resources that we have. So I'm going to continue in that vein and go with another financial assistance resource partner, Danny Nee, Executive Director of the Community Investment Corporation. Danny, will you share a little bit? Unmute yourself. I'm always reminding you that. There you go. Can you unmute?
I can. Sorry about that. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and thanks Barbara. We are a local economic development nonprofit. We have a small business lending portfolio in response to COVID-19. We work in the micro lending space often. So one of the resources and one of the products that we're putting out is a 3% loan up to $10,000. We're going out to 5 years. Currently, there are no prepayment penalties. Either we have relaxed a lot of our criteria. We're going to be looking basically based on businesses' performance prior to COVID-19, not considering necessarily how it's affecting revenues right now. We also have a product that also has a 6-month, basically, it's not even interest only, but there'll be a small monthly amount that would be required to be paid. But basically, again, giving a little bit of lead time for businesses to get back on their feet. One other, or actually 2 other resources that we're currently working on is we have partnerships in conjunction with Growth Partners Arizona. Leslie Pintor, I believe, is on the call as well, with Kiva, and she can talk a little bit more about that, which are 0% loans that are basically crowdfunded. Another group that we're working with is WeFunder out of California. They've actually put together an emergency loan product as well, have changed some of their requirements. Those are loans that can be 0% interest. We're trying to get on a phone call with them to find out exactly what the terms can be. Normally they have a lot of flexibility in terms of what they can do, things like potentially getting a loan at 0%, but then having some profit sharing once an organization gets back on its feet. But we have to get some clarity around exactly what they're going to be offered. The announcement, I think, is coming out tomorrow. In that case, the crowdfunding, there's both good and bad about that, and just the idea of crowdfunding may take a little bit longer, but it's also a way to activate the community and potentially activate customers for businesses that have loyal customer bases, and it may be a way to get even more funding in that case. So that's currently what we're up to. Things are changing on a daily basis. We're trying to bridge, I think, in the way that BDFC is. We're trying to bridge in some cases to some of the SBA loan funding that is now coming out, but there's currently sort of a long lead time and wait to potentially get some of that funding to apply and be able to actually get that funding.
Thanks, Danny. And it's certainly a learning curve on technology as well. I think we found that we're limited to 100 people on our Zoom format. So, and we did have about 300 register. So this is being recorded and we will share this immediately after. So I'm trying to let folks know about that. But I will say, since Gary and Danny have both shared, and going back to maybe Gary, the difference between what you are doing versus maybe the product or assistance that Danny's able to provide at Community Investment Corporation. Why should businesses go to you, Gary, as a local loan originator for applying directly to the SBA as opposed to the local loan originator? Can you comment on the differences there? Oh, you muted yourself. Just figured out. Gary, unmute. There you go.
Okay, is that good?
Yes.
Okay, that's a great question, but I do agree with Danny that the capital infusion that Arizona will receive through the SBA disaster program is significant, and it is unknown what the turnaround time would be. I know Steve Hart was from the SBA, was planning to join the call, and Barbara, at some point, if Steve's on, you may want to ask him that question directly. But the SBA program will have much higher loan limits, will make capital available to for-profit and nonprofits, which is important. And I think what Danny said about possibly a bridge program, our understanding at this point is if a business applies for a loan from another lender, it wouldn't preclude also having a disaster recovery loan. So, but if we can get Steve on, that would be at some point in the call, that'd be great.
Okay, and a question from the attendees: are your COVID-19 loan products, both Gary and Danny, are they secured or unsecured? And are there any automatic disqualifying factors we should be aware of?
In our case, we're taking it on a case-by-case basis in terms of security. My guess is that for businesses that we see with strong performance previously, we won't be asking necessarily for security. We'll be looking at the need. I think the idea for us is trying our best to be able to help as many as possible. And that means in some cases, if people don't have security, we'll just want to look at some other mitigating factors. I think it's one of those hard things where these are not government-backed loans that we're putting out. So repayment is important for our own ongoing sustainability as well. But at the same time, I think we understand that this is a really difficult time, and that's why we won't necessarily require security in every case, but we'll probably ask about it in all cases up front, just to see where somebody's at and what their current situation is.
Okay, great. So let's keep going on the financial topic. I want to introduce Leslie Pintor, Executive Director, Growth Partners Arizona. Leslie, will you share what you're working on?
Absolutely, Barbara. Thanks to Gary and Danny, they explained a lot about how things work, and very similar situation I have to Danny. Actually, we are a local nonprofit organization, actually affiliated with the BDFC. But we're a mission-focused lender, and we're a community development financial institution certified by the U.S. Treasury. So our priority is to borrowers who are located in, who are owned by, or who serve and employ folks who are in underserved communities, namely low to moderate income census tracts. So that's our priority. For our funding. We too do not have the government guarantees, so repayment is important to us as well, and we will factor in all sorts of things to consider whether taking collateral or not as well. Our loan product currently is from $10,000 to $75,000, and we too will be offering some relief up front for the first few months in terms of a lower interest rate than what we typically do, maybe even lower than that. We're kind of on the fly figuring all of that stuff out as we go, right? And to hurry up with my time here, to piggyback on what Danny said about Kiva, that is a loan product that's available to startup companies as well as experienced businesses, and it is a crowd-funded product. But it's 0% interest and it's 0 fees. And so it's really something that could be very helpful to a lot of folks, and very good option for a lot of different people. And that's just under 2 minutes.
That's awesome. And I think it's a great example of collaborations that are happening. Of course, they were happening before this crisis, and now it's ever more important. So I appreciate that the two organizations are working together. I want to see if Bob Nesowitz has joined. Bob, were you able to join?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay, great. So Bob, I want to switch gears a little bit here and talk about something that I know is really very important with our small businesses, including, well, let's just start. I want to start with the food and beverage, restaurant, hospitality industry. These are businesses that started feeling the impact early last week, when dining's not an option, when there are things that they have to do differently than they ever thought they would. What are some strategies for these ones?
Hey, Barbara, before Bob goes, Leslie, I think your mic's still on, so it's having some feedback. It's making it harder to hear Barbara.
Okay, that helps. And then Bob, I failed to introduce you, and I should. Certified Mentor and Score Counselor, which stands for Service Corps. Oh my goodness, I've already messed that up. Service Corps Officers. No, retired executive. You tell me what it is. SCORE of Southern Arizona. Bob, go ahead.
Right. Well, actually, we don't use that anymore. SCORE is a national nonprofit that provides small business mentoring at no charge to local small businesses. And you can sign up for mentoring at our website at any time. My background is in the food service business. And I think relative to the financial discussion, the things that small restaurant businesses should be doing at this point are, of course, participating in the takeout and carry out business. And in fact, tomorrow, a number of national companies have gotten together to make it National Carryout Day. So that should be a good day for you if you're participating in that. But sort of the financial things I think that are important is to narrow the number of menu items so that your cash flow is limited, and narrow the hours. Certainly, you may be looking for rent abatement, so you want to talk to your landlord, talk to your vendors about extending terms on payables. Income tax, if you have income tax that's due, that won't be due till July 15th. You may want to talk to the utility companies to see if you can defer utility payments. These are all fixed costs, loan payments, and then of course the disaster loans that you discussed. So those are all fixed costs to conserve cash. And then also look at variable costs. You don't need as many supplies. You don't need the services at the same level. You may have some equipment on order that you want to defer. Eliminate subscriptions, anywhere in looking at fixed costs and variable costs where you can conserve cash. And I think that's really the most important thing right now from a financial standpoint.
I think that's great advice, and certainly makes a whole lot of sense. And I know all businesses and organizations are looking at conserving right now and being very cautious and looking for deferrals. So I think all of that is good advice. What about, and I'll ask you, Bob, about preparing for the future during this time. What's the importance of business planning, and how does SCORE help with that?
Well, what SCORE does and what I do in mentoring clients is to minimize the risk and maximize the opportunities. The difference between SCORE mentoring and consulting is that we help provide resources and direction so that our clients can figure out their business challenges. In looking at the future, the thing that I think that's most important, and based on my experience, I was in New York City during 9/11 and also Superstorm Sandy. And we were very concerned, are our restaurants going to get food because of the access into Manhattan? Well, we don't have access problems, but we may have supply chain problems. So if you have a restaurant, any type of food service business, I would be planning the food that you're going to need, the vegetable vendor, the meat vendor, the broadline vendor, and determining what you're going to need on that day that you're going to reopen, and then contact those vendors, get those orders in place, and hope that you're at the top of the list when they turn everything back on, because you want to get your customer base back and you want to attract new customers to backfill the losses that you've had in the past. It won't be good enough to just go back to where you were. You want to be even better than you were before. And a key part of that will be marketing and promotions. And I know there's somebody and other people on the, Linda's smiling, that can talk about that. But that's really important to get your food, get in place, and then get the customers back.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bob. And I want to reiterate that SCORE counseling is free. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're here for the life of your business. I've been in Arizona about 4 years. I have clients that I've been working with all that time. And whenever you need us, we're here to help advise, direct, course correct, just somebody to bounce ideas off of as you continue to move through your business.
Thank you, Bob. And of course, we have lots of partners, including our SBDC at Pima Community College, where they're housed, and others that offer the free business counseling. So again, there's more resources than just what you see here today. But let's go to Tim Medcoff, Managing Partner, Farhang and Medcoff Attorneys. Tim, I'm going to ask you to advise on some of the tougher legal and human resource issues and where people should go for guidance in that regard. So share a little bit.
Sure. Being mindful of everybody's time, I won't monopolize it. I could talk about these issues, frankly, for the whole hour. So, Barbara, thank you for the opportunity to talk to the group. I'm actually here and wearing two hats, one on the Tucson Metro Chamber's behalf and then also on behalf of my law firm. So first and foremost, for all business owners, if you haven't gone to Tucson Metro Chamber /COVID-19, I strongly urge you to do so. There's lots of great resources there. One of the things that our firm has been working on is messaging, both in the social media as well as via email, to drive as much traffic to Tucson Metro Chamber as possible, because it's accurate, timely information that gets updated repeatedly there. So it's a great resource for small business owner, big business owners, for all the issues that you're facing in your work environment. Secondarily, I'm encouraging a lot of people to go to our firm's website. We also have a COVID-19 resource center at farhangmedcoff.com. We're sending out legal alerts basically daily, if not multiple times a day, with good resources for employers on how to navigate these uncharted waters that you all are facing. In addition, I put my phone on Do Not Disturb because it's ringing off the hook with questions about COVID-19. How do I handle this? Do I lay off people? Do I do furloughs? Do I do a reduction in force? What's the difference? What's the pros? What's the cons? I frankly could talk to you guys about all of those issues. Again, I want to provide information that's helpful for you as opposed to information that I think is important. There are a lot of questions that we have received on what is the emergency paid sick leave, the Emergency Family Medical Leave Act. What does that mean for our workforce? How do we bridge the gap until that goes into effect on April 1st? I'm glad that Danny and others have been able to Barbara, for you to give them a platform to discuss that. I've been getting lots of questions though from employers about, well, I really don't want to borrow money because I don't know if I'm going to have a business in operation 2 months from now, 4 months from now, because I have no idea how long this shutdown is going to be. If, for instance, you're in the restaurant or medical fields, which a lot of my clients are. So it's good to hear those numbers that really that loan is really not a lot of money on the front end if you end up going that route. So thanks for putting this together. Obviously happy to answer the questions. I can also answer those questions that were emailed earlier related to the emergency family medical leave, paid sick leave, and those things if you like now, Barbara, or later.
Okay. I think it might be good to share a couple of those responses about the leave. And do you have that in front of you?
I do. I just got to pull it up in front of me. Just 1 second. I just got to find the right window because I got too many.
And in the meantime, let me go back to SCORE, Bob, for just a second. Are there Spanish-speaking SCORE mentors? Do you have materials readily available that are translated into Spanish as well?
I believe that we do. I don't know offhand how many, but and many of the resources and written materials are in both languages. So we can help navigate that. If we need interpreters, we can handle that too.
Okay, I think that would be great too if you identify after this webinar maybe some who are Spanish speaking in your network of SCORE mentors. There was another question about the role that the National Guard would play in supply chain. I don't know if anyone has advice on that, but you can be thinking about it if you do and chime in a moment. Tim, are you ready to go back?
I am. So some of the questions we're getting is, what should a business do when an employee calls in sick? What sort of documentation should you be requesting? What can you request? So the advice that we're giving clients, if anybody calls in with symptoms that are maybe COVID-19 related, such as fevers, dry coughs, shortness of breath, things of that nature, we advise all employers, send your employees home, tell the employee to follow up with their doctor. If the employee's out 3 or more days under the Arizona statutes, you can then request backup documents. But we're cautioning employers, don't do that right now. Our healthcare system is way overstrapped and shorthanded, and they've got bigger things to take care of. So rather than request the documentation now, just have the employee keep you informed of their status, their symptoms, how they're feeling, and what they're being told by the doctors or hospitals if they are sent out for a test. A lot of times they're going to get initial screenings first, and then the hospital or lab will take a formal test and then give them the results. Obviously, if they are sick in any way, shape, or form, and whether they get confirmed or not, you'll need backup documents so that you can apply for payroll tax benefits if this is after April 1st. In addition, one of the other questions we got is what evidence will the government require to get that paid credit back on the payroll taxes? Unfortunately, we're waiting on guidance from the Secretary of Labor. We don't know what that's going to be, but we anticipate it's going to be a reasonableness sort of standard, i.e. the employer and employee signing forms under perjury that an employee took time off because of COVID-19 illnesses or symptoms. And then if you submit those, that's where you get a dollar for dollar credit on the tax, payroll tax basis. The statute also includes a refund. So if you have people taking more sick time than you have people actually working, then you can apply for a refund from the government. Again, that's unknown at this point as to how that's ultimately going to work out. Some other questions that were posed to Barbara prior to this call was, well, how does team members take time off? Is it required that they take 2 weeks off? Can they do it intermittently like under the FMLA? I would say you can take it intermittently if it's taking time off to basically switch with a significant other or spouse with respect to managing your kids that are home from school. But if you are sick or you're taking care of somebody who's sick, then you're not going to really be able to do that intermittently because you then may be a carrier unbeknownst to yourself. So the CDC's recent guidance says that you got to be fever free for 3 days and at least 7 days since your symptoms first appeared. So if you're taking care of a spouse or family member or somebody else that lives with you and they're sick, then you need to wait 7 days till after their symptoms subside before you could return back to work. So the other question that was asked was how much time do you get off? So under the emergency paid sick leave, it's 2 weeks under that statute. Under the emergency family medical leave, it's 12 weeks, but it's 12 weeks total pay under both statutes. You don't get to stack them on top of each other, so you don't get 14 weeks of paid off. You get 12 weeks total. You can use the emergency family medical leave time off to bridge the gap under the Emergency Family Medical Leave Act, because the first 10 days under the emergency FMLA is not with pay. So you could stack the emergency paid sick leave time for that, or you could use your personal time off or sick time that you've accrued under Arizona state law or pursuant to your employer's policies. Another question was, how does existing PTO sick time work with your sick time? So you cannot require employees to use your regular PTO first. That's up to the discretion of the employee of whether they want to do that. And then how does COVID sick time work with short-time disability or short-term disability? The employee might be able to apply for short-term disability just like any other disease. It's going to depend on the policy and the terms of that policy. So you just should advise your employees if they're really sick and they're laid up in bed, which some of the reports are, that's what some of the side effects of the virus is, then if they're eligible or potentially eligible, err on the side of caution of submitting the claim and then letting the claim process work its course.
Thanks, Tim. I think that's helpful. All the ideas and advice are good. And I do remind folks to always check the CDC for the latest guidelines on some of those things and the resources available to you. So let's go to our final presenter that we have formalized for today, and that's Linda Welter, CEO of the Caliber Group. She is an expert in marketing and public relations here locally and available to share some thoughts about some best practices for you as you navigate through this time. I think internal and external communications are essential. Linda, I'll let you share.
Sure. Thank you, Barbara, and all the panelists for being here today. Really some great information that you're sharing. First and foremost, I'm a business owner like many of you on the call today. Caliber is, as Barbara mentioned, a brand marketing, PR, and crisis management firm based here in Tucson, and we've been around for 22 years and fortunately have survived the dot-com bust, 9/11, and the last recession. And during that time, I have been very fortunate to work with some amazing individuals who've applied some really great practices that have helped their businesses to survive during really uncertain times like what we are experiencing here today. So what I have, and in addition to that, I've also worked with many businesses who've gone through major issues or crises, and there are some certain practices that all have done to help navigate the storm and help their business to come out better on the backside of that major issue or crisis. So I put together some of those best practices and I wanted to share it with everybody here today on the call. And they're really kind of bucketed into two areas. One is actually putting together a business contingency plan or a crisis management plan. And then I'm also going to walk through some of the best leadership practices that are really important during times of uncertainty like we're experiencing now. So first I'm going to talk about putting together your business contingency plan. Some of you may have already put together a plan. You might be implementing phase 2 of your plan right now, but many of you do not have a plan already in place to manage a crisis. And the first and most important thing to do after the shock of everything has worn off is to sit down with your team, your leadership team, and identify the most serious threats to your business. Identify those in the matter of what could actually halt business operations. And then after you identify each of those threats, put to the top of your list the most serious threats that are going to have the greatest impact. Then identify the resources that it's going to take to resolve those threats. Also identify those resources that you can and cannot live without. If you were to cut costs, for example. Next, you develop an action plan for each one of those threats, and step by step, all the things that you and your team need to do to resolve each and every threat. And then after you have a plan in place, it's important to make sure that every member of your team is updated on what their roles and responsibilities are in carrying out your action plan to resolve each threat. Now that's summarized very briefly. I've done webinars on this topic before and sometimes can go into great depth, half-day webinar, 2-hour webinar, and so on. So I have included information on our website. If you go to calibergroup.com, you can get more details on how to put together a more detailed crisis management plan for your organization. So the second part that I want to go through is how important it is to be a really effective leader at this time. It's really important right now that you use your influence within your organization and your community to help others right now. You can't change the circumstance that we're all dealing with, but you can focus on what's in your control, and that's yourself. It's important that you stay cool under pressure and lead with both courage and heart. It's important that You not only focus on helping your employees get through this, but your customers, your partners, your vendors, and as I mentioned earlier, your community. Find your resilience, find a way to make it work no matter what. What got you here today in your business will impact how you get there on the other side of this crisis. It's important that as a leader, you find your clarity as quickly as possible. When you have clarity, it allows you to think, it allows you to act and lead at your best. Distance yourself from the current situation and ask yourself, how do I want to look back on how my business navigated this storm after you get through it? How do you want to look back on yourself and how you rose to the challenge? And set that as your goal as you navigate through this. Move to, we've all been reacting over the past week. Everybody has been reacting. News has been being thrown at us day by day. We're not sure what to believe. And it's a lot of information in a very short period of time. So everyone, when you're in the trenches like that, it's really, you go through these various emotions that you go through, from anger to upset to fear. It's really important that you move past those emotions that can negatively affect how you're managing your business, and that you move to a proactive state of mind. And it's also really important that your team starts working towards a forward thinking, a toward mindset, as opposed to a reactive mindset. It's also important during this time, you're going to get questions from your customers, you're going to get questions from your employees. You can go from gloom and doom, which is not going to help your business and help your situation, to being overly optimistic to where you're unbelievable, and people will see right through that. So it's really important that you strike a balance somewhere right in the middle, and it's called realistic optimism. And it's important also that you be honest, but also as a leader, when the news is not positive, that you create a vision to get through the negative situation that you're in. Nobody has all the answers right now. We're in too fluid of a situation. This is unprecedented for all of us to be managing and dealing with. As a leader, one good practice that we've communicated within our business, and other leaders will recommend this as well, is to meet with your team daily. Many of us are working remotely, working virtual, and it's important to touch base at the beginning of each workday and understand what each member of your team's top priorities are. Also ask them what they know and what they don't know. It's a good basis to help them get what they need to be able to do their job effectively. It's also important that you are meeting regularly with your leadership team, at least 2 to 3 times a week, and drilling down even deeper on those issues that are impacting your workflow operations.
No, I appreciate, Linda, that it's absolutely important that, and you shared about those key things, that confidence is part of the leadership style, that being positive and proactive and having clarity contributes to all of that, and contributes to everybody keeping calm, I think, as well, and moving forward. So I appreciate your comments, because this is a very different time for everyone, and we're all getting used to this working remotely. So I want to go back. There are a lot of questions coming through on the chat, and some are being responded to. So if you haven't checked your chat box, go ahead and look at that. We had some questions about, if a merchant closes its business, are they obligated to pay accrued sick leave? And I believe Tim was offering some advice on that. Do you want to chime in, Tim, on some of those responses that you've given?
Sure. So this is a question that we've been asked a lot by our multiple different clients. So you really need to look at your employment policies and handbook for guidance on this. Under Arizona state law, you're not required to pay accrued, unused vacation time, sick leave, or personal time off upon separation. The law used to require you to do that if there was an expectation by the employee to get paid that, but that changed in 2017 with the Prop 206 law going into effect. So employers are no longer obliged to pay that unless they have an employment agreement with their employee that requires them to pay it, or their policies or handbook require them to pay it. And that's really important for you as an employer if you're having to do layoffs, because the whole purpose, as Bob mentioned a few minutes ago, is trying to save money when you make business decisions. And if you end up laying off your workforce and have to write a big fat check because there's a bunch of accrued, unused personal time off banked, then that doesn't save your business any money. So you definitely want to take a quick look at that, talk to your trusted legal advisors about these issues. A question that wasn't asked, but I think is important that I'd just like to point out, if you are thinking about making employment decisions, layoffs, terminations, etc., check with your insurance agent, broker, to see if you got employment practices liability insurance and whether you have a rider for wage and hour claims, because that insurance policy and that rider, which is separate from the EPLI, could provide some great protections for you to limit your exposure in the event a claim is brought. And if you don't have those insurance policies, then it's going to come out of your bottom line to pay whatever lawyer you hire to defend your company against those claims.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tim. There's a question about the level of transparency that you would recommend with employees in terms of runway available to the company. Who wants to take that?
I'll be happy to take that. You know, that's the age-old question. It's one of the most difficult questions. If you communicate too early, when you really fully understand what the bad news is going to be, it can really adversely impact your business operations. But at the same time, you know, as I mentioned earlier, lead with courage and lead with heart. So giving your employees and those that are impacted through a separation as much advance notice as possible, it is recommended.
Okay, great. There's a, it looks like I have Carol Shaughnessy on the line who might be able to provide some additional details on the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Carol, did you want to comment on that? And certainly there's some things that we can share as follow-up materials.
Sure. Yeah, actually, you do need, as I was looking through the chat, many of the other lenders have the same constraints in that you're going to have to show that for this particular economic injury disaster loan through the SBA, you'll have to show that you did show a drop off once the virus hit, that you were making money, you know, whatever that level that looked like prior to. It is based on 6 months of operating capital, repayable over a 15 or 30 year amortization. So it's going to be super low payments. I believe it's a 3% interest off the top of my head. So there are qualifications that it's very much, we were told on the webinar, going to be on a case-by-case basis. So you'll be submitting your federal income tax returns, your financial statements, your scheduled liabilities, and they'll be looking through all of that. Lots of other products out there, as the other presenters were discussing. So lots of opportunities.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carol, for chiming in on that. I didn't know if, Bob, if Steve Hart had joined us or who had mentioned that Steve might be on. If you are, Steve, let us know. And then I have a question. I know someone was asking, Tim, if you could repeat the two insurance policy coverages. One was wage and hour claim coverage. What was the other?
Sure. So it's, I talk fast, sorry guys. Employment Practices Liability Insurance, EPLI is the acronym. So that will cover any wrongful termination, any discrimination claims, things of that nature. And then you want to ask your insurance agent for to verify if you have a rider that covers wage and hour claims, because without that, which frankly is what most employers get sued for, is lost commissions, failure to pay bonuses, failure to pay regular wages due and owing, that rider would cover those wage claims. And it's really important in Arizona because there's a treble damage statute in our state that if you fail to pay wages owed to an employee, it's up to the discretion of the judge to order triple the amount that is owed originally to the employee. So it's really important to talk to your insurance agent about those issues to make sure you're covered for both EPLI and the rider for wage and hour.
Okay, great. So there's comments on the chat, and I appreciate everyone helping each other out. The question for Carol was, any guess on how long an SBA disaster loan application may take to process?
We were told, that's a great question. We were told on the webinar last week that they're looking at 2 to 3 weeks for turnaround. I will say that the SBA right now is inundated. So getting through by phone call to the national is not really feasible right now. You might try Steve Hart locally.
Okay, great. And for our speakers, since we've been talking now for 46 minutes or so, has anything else come up for you that you feel like you should respond to or have some advice about of any of the topics that have been mentioned here today?
Barbara, can I just hop in on something that Linda said? And it is about, I think, in this time of crisis, there are things that are happening around the community where people are really looking to support the businesses out there. There's a group called Tucson Helping Tucson that's trying to raise money through a fundraiser coming up in a few weeks. There are some, I just think sometimes being able to take a positive step even in the midst of when you're hurting as a nonprofit, as I like to always say, we depend on people's generosity. And so we also try to give our own grants out while we're asking for funding. And during this time, which is really hard to ask, but for the businesses to also look to support one another, and then additionally to look at what's happening in the community, how people are rallying around our small businesses, our local businesses that are so important, not only to our economy, but to our culture here in Tucson. And I think there are some efforts that are coming up to, get musicians back to work. That's one of the things Tucson Helping Tucson is trying to do. And then raise a loan fund, basically, and I think both grant and loan fund to then continue to augment the support that you're seeing through SBA and others around town. So a lot of people are here trying to help, and I hope there's at least that positive piece that we can feel about what's going on.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There are a lot of creative ideas already coming out, and you all have been part of that. And I've seen the entertainers deciding to do some online entertainment and all kinds of things that we're doing to stay in touch and in communication, which is so important. There are some questions coming up about loss of a deal because of COVID-19 and how that helps, sharing that example. Does that help with, I guess, the SBA application process? If you're going into a significant transaction and that corporate policy stopped those transactions, anyone could speak to that and how you share or describe your situation?
I can talk about it from a legal standpoint, not from the SBA standpoint, so I'll defer to those smarter than me on that issue. But from a legal standpoint, there have been cases already filed, believe it or not, about business interruption insurance and whether there's coverage for restaurants being closed. And so that's definitely going to be a hot button topic. Ultimately, I think the way that this is going to play out is that Congress is going to do similar to what they did in 2008, 2009 with the bailout. That's going to provide coverage for any business that can come forward and show that they lost revenue as a result of this crisis. Because some of you as business owners may not know that there is such a thing called business interruption insurance, and you may not have coverage for it. So if you don't have coverage for it and didn't purchase it, then you're kind of out high and dry if there is legislation or other things that come out that says we're going to cover you for that loss. So I think ultimately Congress, if they are smart, which I like to think they are, will ultimately cover that for employers, which will be a huge windfall is not the right word, but backstop, I guess, for business owners to help them through this difficult time. And so definitely wanted to share that with you. You want to talk to your insurance agent about, do I have business interruption insurance? Will it cover this loss? Will it cover the loss of a business transaction that fell through? I've been getting calls from clients too, like, hey, I just purchased a home. Can I back out of the deal, or what are my options? And the reality is a lot of those are going to be governed by the contract itself, and whether there's a pandemic force majeure provision in it that lets back outs, or if there's a finance contingency in that agreement that allows you to back out of the deal.
No, that's great information. We always seem to, I guess, learn from what the moment we're in now, and hindsight's 2020 on some of these things. But we definitely, I think about it as planning for the future. If there are coverages that we're going to need moving forward, maybe we take those more seriously. I enjoy looking at the comments about the businesses that are on the chat that are asking about certain ones being open. And it reminds me to bring up that there have been a lot of great resources. Again, I know Downtown Tucson Partnership has continually provided a list of businesses in the downtown and what they're doing to be open or modify their business service during this time. But again, citywide, if there are things, I know the chamber, again, Tim, you had mentioned the website there is a great place for finding that information. And I think Visit Tucson is also putting together a lot of resources. So continue to look at those. Here's a question. If you are a business and have delivery or carry out available, yes, then okay, it's a statement. So they're sharing a database on Tucson.com, and so you could put your information there. And it looks like a lot more are responding on that. Yes, Tucson.com is a great place also. So you're going to find a lot of places where there's information. I know people say, oh, it'd be great to have one place. I'm not sure that there will ultimately be one place, but it's good to have a variety of places to go and find out this information. What other questions out there that we have not addressed?
Hey, Barbara. This is Leslie Pintor with Growth Partners Arizona. I just wanted to share some of the experience I'm having in having conversations with people. And I think I haven't gotten a lot of actual formal requests for loans yet. What I've been spending a lot of my time doing is having conversations with people who are just confused and need to just talk through some things. And so I would say to all the business owners out there, whether it's somebody like me at my organization, or Bob at SCORE, or the SBDC, or your lender, or whoever, please don't be afraid to call and ask questions and just talk through some of these issues, because I'm finding that most people just have a need to talk to somebody and just noodle through ideas that they're having in their mind, and just talking it through it out loud is very, very helpful. And we can be a good resource to help you all figure out what to do next in terms of your planning and your thinking through what's happening with your business. So feel free to give us a call just to talk through things. That's okay too.
That's a great point, and that's truly the reason why there's a variety of resource partners on this webinar today, and many of you that are listening in are also resource partners. And so at the city, in our Office of Economic Initiatives, we've been trying to create a list of those people that, again, as we receive calls, we're referring them out to you all as well, because mostly they need someone to talk through, as you say, these things, and to listen to what they're going through, and then try to find the right resources for them. Just be a sounding board as well. There's a question about salons and hairdressers that are self-employed. They don't have the same options as some of the dining and restaurant establishments do to do online or takeout. They're more service oriented. Anyone have any tips for how those businesses should proceed, or how they should be, what they should be thinking about right now? I wonder, Bob or Linda, if you have thoughts about that. I can tell you one of the things that we're going to be watching minute by minute as changes occur and as policies are updated at the federal and state level, and that ultimately become local level decisions, that things can change in a moment where it all looks different tomorrow. And so we'll have to keep reinventing some of these responses. But I think in the meantime, we've been saying businesses need to use their best judgment based on what they're seeing at the CDC in terms of the guidelines. Any other thoughts?
Barbara, this is Tim. With respect to this issue in particular, it's not dissimilar from other questions I'm getting from healthcare providers, dental offices, and things of that nature about how do I meet the needs of clients and still protect my team and or the general public. So what I've been encouraging them to do is, as long as there's been no official executive order or other announcement to stop them from working, I've been telling them space out your appointments significantly or sufficiently enough that you can do a full cleanse of any areas that patients may have touched, whether it be arm rests in a dental chair, the doorknobs to get into the office, things of that nature. So with respect to the salons and hairdressers, I mean, obviously it's hard to do their job without, being within 6 feet. I haven't seen a stylist with arms long enough to cut hair more than 6 feet away. So, obviously if they can get masks and things of that nature and then take all the precautions that they can to sterilize their workspace and then space out the appointments, I think that's the best you can do under the circumstances.
It looks like someone commented that with the salon services, they're promoting appointment-only services for hair and things like that. And again, like you say, take precautions. Again, we'll just, advise you to look at CDC for guidelines as to how things may change in the coming days. A lot of great questions. One is about, will the city of Tucson relax the sign code governing banners and sandwich board signs? We're suggesting these as advertising assistance to our tenants. That is suggested by one of the webinar participants. So that's a great question, and we'll look into that. I'll be able to follow up on that with our City of Tucson Planning and Development Services team, and we'll get an answer for you. What else? Let's see. It looks like there is a suggestion about going to the Department of Cosmetology for some feedback as well. And see what how they can advise those folks to proceed. And
Barbara, that's actually a really good point. In fact, many of you probably on the phone know that restaurants that have a liquor license can now deliver alcohol with their food purchases. If you don't know that, then you're welcome. That's obviously going to be helpful for business restaurant owners. I've been talking to several restaurant owners. It hasn't been a huge impact on their bottom line. They're getting about 8 to 10 sort of orders per day with alcohol. But I think that part of that is a reflection that people stocked up on alcohol. And so as they start running out, they'll potentially take advantage of that. But that's similar to doing the house calls. I had another client that provides skincare, and they're starting to make house calls because they want to try to provide services to their clients, but also minimize the risk. If you are going to do house calls, definitely talk to your insurance agent again. I really should work for Crest or have stock in Crest Insurance or those companies because you're going to want to make sure you have a hired auto insurance policy that covers any accidents that may happen as employees are going en route or from a person's home. The last thing I'll say, I know this has all been kind of, hey, this sucks, and it's kind of doom and gloom, and when are we going to see the light at the end of the tunnel? I started my law firm in 2008 when the economy was terrible, and so I like to see the silver lining on issues. As all of us know, as business owners, the employment options were terrible for us prior to the COVID-19 crisis. This is a great opportunity if you proactively think about what your business plan is going to be, working with somebody like Linda Welcher and others to brainstorm about the future, talking with Bob, because if you plan accordingly, and there's going to be tons of great talent available for you to cherry pick from if you're planning proactively. So I strongly encourage you to think about that, about what do you want your business to look like after you survive this.
Okay, all right, we're gonna wrap things up. I know there's questions about general contracting. I know I had a mover business call me today. I know there's a lot of businesses, all of you have your special niche, and there are probably special things that go with that, and we're gonna try to be available to you in a couple of different ways. And so I'll wrap that up by saying, please do stay in touch and use our connecttucson.com for updates. We'll have some COVID-19 resources there. You heard and you see on the chat links to the Chamber's website, to tucson.com, and a variety of others. And then you can use our small business hotline. We will man that hotline, so you'll get someone to talk to at 520-837-4100. And again, the goal is to not have you navigate all of this in isolation, but rather have people for you to reach out to for support, for questions and concerns. So again, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll follow up with everyone, including those who couldn't get on the webinar, and we'll try to sort through that. I've asked for topics that you're interested in. You can share those on the chat function before you sign off. And then we will get a copy of the recording up on the website as well for you to share with others that may not have been able to participate. And we'll take a look at doing this regularly. We could, if you find this valuable, have this as a weekly and do one again next Monday. So again, all your comments would be appreciated. With that, I think we can sign off. I thank our sponsors. Thank you all. Yay, that's like jazz hands or excitement, I know, for everybody. Thank you very much. And we'll talk again soon. Have a great rest of your day. Be safe.